like many novice teachers, I was trying to emulate the teachers that I had that I thought were amazing. And so whether I actually made the list or not, in my head somewhere, there was this idea that I wanted to be funny like one teacher, and I wanted to be super smart like another, and I wanted to just be like totally put together or organized, and I had sort of this mental checklist of what would be a good teacher, and it was all sort of a hybrid of all these teachers that I had had.
For me, I think over the years, I've had to grow into teaching like myself, like figuring out what it was to be myself in front of the kids.
Teaching like myself means being in the room as close to who I would be in any sort of environment, where the goal is to increase my own learning and also to help those around me kind of reach their goals as well. For me, it's really been about thinking of myself as a beginner, as a learner, not necessarily as the arbiter of what's right and wrong all the time, not necessarily as the owner or possessor of the grades that students are working to, receive from me, but rather just try to create a community where we're all working towards goals.
It's about kind of knowing what's best for kids and figuring out how you, bringing the strengths and talents you have, can do what's best for kids in this one particular lesson or area.
It's not always easy to really meet the individual needs of all of your students and learn their strengths and their weaknesses, so it's easier to continue to do what's best for you. And I definitely fell into that trap when I was a teacher for quite some time. It was like, this is my classroom, my students are going to learn, like according to my teaching style. And it took me a while to learn, a couple years, that hey, like it's not about me, it's about the students. So we kind of need to ask ourselves, how can we make sure that authentic learning takes place inside of our learning spaces?
So it's almost like what I'm hearing is, for you, teaching like yourself is allowing students to learn like themselves.
Yes, exactly. It's giving your students a voice and a choice and really meeting them where they are.
So that to me is also about being yourself, being able to be in the moment with the kids, treating them like human beings and friends, and kind of teaching them, but also having that interaction that's that can't be scripted. And that's when it gets a little bit scary, and it can get messy in the sense that I don't really know sometimes where the kids' thinking is going to take me, but I feel like that's exciting.
I like to use sports metaphors, but I keep thinking, like, as a soccer player, like, you don't want everyone to be a center forward. Right. Right? Like, you need all these people to be, like, working towards the same thing on the field, but you need a left back, and you need a goalie, and and so I think in some ways, when we don't allow teachers to teach like themselves, we're sort of making everybody play the same position, right? And then that's the same thing that's happening for students. And if we actually played that out logically, then we have a whole generation of kids who are all coming out with the exact same skills. Like, how would that even work in the world?
So I think there are many things that could get in the way of a teacher being his or her authentic self. But I think it really comes back to leadership. I really think it does. And as an elementary principal, if I have teachers that aren't teaching or doing things the way I think they should be done, or they're not performing for their students, or their students aren't learning, I really have two options. One is I could blame the teacher, or two, I could ask myself what I could do differently to more effectively lead this teacher. And from my experiences, it's tough. It's tough to look at yourself and like put the onus on you and say, okay, I need to do something differently. It's a lot easier to bash other people and say they're doing this wrong, they're no good. But we really have to look at ourselves as leaders or as administrators and say, what can I do differently?
Well, and that makes me think a little bit about the leadership being really authentic too, and like leading like themselves, and sort of this idea of, I think you can't have a culture where people can teach and lead like themselves if there isn't vulnerability and there isn't that relationship. And so I think what gets in the way sometimes is getting right to the content rather than building those relationships, or rather than having some kind of experiences where we get to know each other as people. When we teach like ourselves, we're giving permission to our students to learn like themselves, and how important that is, because we're not only modeling, but we're creating space for everyone to show up fully with their gifts and their talents and their quirks and their passions and their interests. And so when a student has a teacher who's bringing all of that in, then there's space for everybody else to do that. And what a gift we can give to one another is to create space for everyone in the school to be learning like themselves.